Few sports carry as much prospect uncertainty as baseball. Between 2000 and 2015, just 78% of top 30 MLB draft picks ever reached the major leagues. Compare that to the NFL or NBA, where most first-round selections see meaningful playing time almost immediately. Even elite college baseball players typically take more than 2 years to make their MLB debut, if they make it at all. For the average baseball fan, the MLB draft isn't much watched television. As a result, most fans couldn't name more than a handful of their team's top prospects. Growing up, I loved prospect lists. However, without the tools to evaluate players myself, my understanding of prospects was basically a recycled version of whatever ranking I'd read that week. And while prospect evaluation will always involve uncertainty, especially given how much development happens in the minor leagues, we now have an abundance of minor league data that can help us better understand which players are actually on a path to MLB success. In this video, I'm going to analyze historical minor league data to identify which statistics are most predictive of success at the major league level. I'm not claiming to have the definitive method for evaluating prospects. If I did, I'd be working for an MLB front office. Instead, my goal is to show you as a baseball fan what stats you should be paying attention to when tracking prospect development. First, we'll look at a sample of 250 hitters whose careers primarily fell in the 2020s, using their AA statistics to test which metrics meaningfully correlate with their MLB outcomes. Then we'll examine MLB hitters who saw at least 500 pitches in AAA between 2023 and 2024, seasons where statcast data is available, to see what advanced metrics can tell us about future MLB performance. There are some important limitations to this analysis, most notably survivorship bias. Every player in these datasets reached the major leagues, even though estimates suggest that only about 10% of all minor leaguers ever do. That means we're excluding the vast majority of players who ever play in the minor leagues. However, the purpose of this analysis isn't to predict whether a player will reach the majors, it's to understand why some MLB players become good ones while others don't. Even within this already successful group, outcomes vary dramatically. Finally, I'll apply these findings to a handful of under-the-radar minor leaguers who aren't currently viewed as top prospects, but who I believe have a real chance to either rise up prospect rankings or eventually carve out a role in the major leagues. Let's start with the AA analysis. This dataset gives us a much larger sample size, but it's limited to traditional and advanced stats since StatCast isn't available at the AA level. When we compare WRC Plus and WOBA in AA to a player's major league averages from the 2020s, both metrics are statistically significant predictors of their MLB counterparts. However, the relationships themselves are fairly weak, as reflected by the low R-squared values. Several statistics that I initially expected to matter turned out to be surprisingly uninformative. AA line drive rate and even fly ball rate, once pop-ups are removed, show essentially no relationship with MLB WRC Plus or WOBA. Where the analysis becomes more interesting is with certain outcome-based statistics. AA strikeout rate has a clear and statistically significant relationship with MLB strikeout rate. The same is true with walk rate and isolated power, although those correlations are weaker than what we saw with strikeouts. In other words, a hitter's tendency to strike out, draw walks, or hit for power in AA tends to carry over into the major leagues. That said, these tendencies aren't fixed. When we look at the scatter plots for walk rate and ISO, players like Aaron Judge, Ketel Marte, Jose Ramirez, Ronald Acuna Jr. far exceed what their AA numbers would have predicted. We see similar deviations for strikeout rates, where players such as Jake Bauers and Patrick Wisdom strike out far more in the majors than their AA profiles would suggest. Even with these outliers, these metrics show far less variability from AA to MLB than most other statistics we tested, including metrics like on-base percentage and WOBA. That consistency makes strikeout rate, walk rate, and isolated power some of the most reliable indicators we can extract from AA performance. Let's now move to the AAA StatCast analysis. Here we're looking at hitters who saw at least 500 pitches in AAA between 2023 and 2024, seasons where StatCast data is available, and at least 500 pitches in the major leagues. I want to be clear about the limitations up front. A 500 pitch minimum is not a large enough sample to make definitive claims about a player's long-term MLB success, especially since for many of these hitters, those 500 MLB pitches represent their first exposure to the league. Players can and do make adjustments over time. That said, this analysis is still useful for identifying which metrics best reflect MLB readiness and which skills tend to carry over most immediately from AAA to the majors. Before diving into StatCast specific metrics, we again see strong relationships between AAA and MLB walk rate, strikeout rate, and isolated power, mirroring what we observed in AA. Notably, AAA whiff rate and chase rate show even stronger relationships with MLB strikeout and walk rates than AAA strikeout and walk rates themselves, suggesting these underlying plate discipline measures may be more informative than the AAA outcomes. Let's now look at 3 commonly used plate discipline metrics. Swing percentage measures how often a hitter swings at pitches overall. Z-swing percentage captures how often a hitter swings at pitches in the strike zone, while Z-contact percentage measures how often those swings at strikes result in contact. Together, these stats help describe a hitter's approach at the plate. Swing percentage provides a broad measure of aggressiveness. A low Z-swing percentage can indicate passivity, while a low Z-contact percentage points to weak bat-to-ball skills, even on hittable pitches. When we compare these AAA metrics to their MLB equivalents, all 3 show strong correlations. Among them, Z-contact percentage has the weakest relationship, as reflected by its R-squared value. This result makes intuitive sense. Swing decisions tend to be more stable across levels, while the outcomes of those swings, especially contact quality, are more sensitive to competition. Importantly, these plate discipline metrics describe process rather than results. Using a sample of 403 MLB hitters with at least 500 plate appearances between 2023 and 2025, we find no statistically significant relationship between swing percentage, Z-swing percentage, or Z-contact percentage in WOBA. That doesn't make these statistics meaningless. Instead, they help explain how hitters arrive at their outcomes even if they don't directly predict them. These metrics capture underlying tendencies such as aggressiveness and contact ability on strikes that don't always translate cleanly into result-based stats like WOBA, but often provide context for why a player's results look the way that they do. Now let's turn to quality of contact metrics. Exit velocity measures the average speed of a ball off the bat on contact. Hard hit rate tracks the percentage of batted balls hit at 95 miles per hour or harder, while barrel rate measures how often a hitter produces an optimal combination of exit velocity and launch angle. When we compare these AAA metrics to their MLB equivalents, all 3 show statistically significant and moderately strong relationships. Hard hit rate stands out in particular, with over half the variation in MLB hard hit rate explained by its AAA counterpart. Returning to our sample of 403 MLB hitters, all 3 quality of contact metrics also show statistically significant relationships with WOBA. At the major league level, these stats are among the most useful tools for approximating offensive production. And given their strong carryover from AAA to MLB, quality of contact metrics appear to be the most informative StatCast stats to consider when evaluating minor league hitting prospects. Now that we have a clearer sense of what actually matters when evaluating prospects, let's put that framework into practice. Using Prospect Savant, I searched for players who consistently posted strong quality of contact metrics while also walking at a reasonable clip and keeping strikeouts in check. While I placed the most weight on contact quality, I also factored in strikeout and walk rates as secondary indicators. Using that approach, I identified 4 AAA prospects and 4 single-A prospects who I believe have a legitimate chance to either rise up prospect rankings or eventually carve out a role at the major league level. Alex Freeland is a 24-year-old infielder currently ranked as the Dodgers' 8th best prospect by Fangraphs. I included Freeland because many have cooled on him following a brief and underwhelming MLB stint last season. His profile is built on an extremely patient approach, sometimes to a fault. While that patience worked in AAA, his first exposure to MLB pitching raised some important questions. In just 97 Major League Plate appearances, Freeland's contact rate dropped sharply, and his tendency to take pitches often put him in pitchers' counts, leading to elevated strikeout totals. That said, Freeland's calling card remains his ability to hit the ball hard. Even during his struggles in the majors, he posted an average exit velocity of 90.7 miles per hour. While he'll likely need to make adjustments, particularly becoming more aggressive earlier in counts, the underlying metrics suggest there's still a viable path for him to succeed at the MLB level. Ryan Clifford is a first baseman and corner outfielder ranked 8th in the Mets system according to Fangraphs. In nearly 150 AAA plate appearances last season, his traditional 219, 359, 395 slash line and 102 WRC plus looked fairly ordinary. But beneath the surface, Clifford's quality of contact metrics were excellent. Combined with the 15.5 walk rate, those metrics translated to a 373 expected weighted on base average. If Clifford can maintain those underlying numbers heading into 2026, his results should improve significantly. With Pete Alonso no longer in the picture and long-term uncertainty at first base for the Mets, Clifford could find himself in line for regular playing time later in the 2026 season. Abimelec Ortiz is a 23-year-old first baseman ranked 28th in the Rangers system by Fangraphs. After earning a mid-season promotion to AAA in 2025, Ortiz immediately showcased elite quality of contact metrics, highlighted by a 54% hard hit rate. Over the past 2 seasons, he's also made major strides in plate discipline, cutting his strikeout rate from an unplayable 30% in 2023 to around league average. On top of that, Ortiz walks at an above-average rate, giving him additional ways to contribute offensively. Following a strong AAA showing, he earned a spot on the Rangers' 40-man roster and protection from the Rule 5 draft. While his defense remains a concern, graded at 30 out of 80 by Fangraphs, his bat gives him a realistic chance to reach the majors at some point in 2026. Finally, here's my fun prospect. Kemp Alderman is a 23-year-old outfielder ranked 30th in the Marlins system by Fangraphs. A quick look at his Prospects Savant page shows exactly what kind of hitter he is. He carries a high whiff rate, an elevated chase rate, below average zone contact, and a poor walk rate. Despite those very real flaws, Alderman has some of the best quality of contact metrics of any minor leaguer. His AAA sample size is small, making him a player worth monitoring early in the 2026 season. Given his plate discipline issues, he'll need to continue producing elite contact to succeed, but his all-or-nothing profile makes him one of the more intriguing and volatile prospects in baseball. Let's now turn to single-A prospects. While our earlier analyses didn't include single-A hitters, we're going to operate under the assumption that quality of contact metrics and, to a lesser extent, walk and strikeout rates remain the most informative indicators of future offensive success at this level. The most high-profile player in this group is Bryce Rayner, a 20-year-old shortstop ranked as the 5th best prospect in the Tigers system by Fangraphs. Selected as the 11th pick in the 2024 draft, Rayner has already shown strong quality of contact metrics, along with an above-average walk and below-average strikeout rate. His breakout 2025 season was unfortunately cut short after he dislocated his shoulder diving back into first base on a pickoff attempt, making his recovery something to monitor closely for any lingering effects on his offensive output. There are a few concerns, most notably elevated whiff rates and a low pull fly ball rate. It's also likely that Rayner eventually moves off shortstop defensively. Even so, his offensive profile gives him a real chance to climb prospect rankings and potentially reach the major leagues. Tony Blanco Jr. is a 20-year-old first baseman ranked 18th in the Pirates system according to Fangraphs, and he may be the hardest hitter in this entire group. Standing at 6'7", Blanco produced a staggering 119.8 mph max exit velocity in 2025, and during the Arizona Fall League he had a double at 120.4 mph. In the StatCast era, only Giancarlo Stanton, O'Neal Cruz, Aaron Judge, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Ronald Acuna Jr., and Gary Sanchez have recorded batted balls at or above that level. Along with his elite contact quality, Blanco walks at an above-average rate. The concerns are clear: poor defense and significant plate discipline issues evidenced by high whiff, chase, and strikeout rates. Still, Blanco's generational power gives him legitimate superstar upside if he can make even modest improvements to his plate discipline. Sticking with Pirates prospects, Axiel Plaz is a catcher and first baseman ranked 48th in the organization by Fangraphs. Plaz is an extremely aggressive hitter at the plate, ranking in the 4th percentile in chase rate and the 90th percentile in swing rate. That approach limits his walk rate, but notably it hasn't led to excessive strikeouts. When he makes contact, the results are loud, with quality of contact metrics in the mid to upper 90th percentiles. After excelling in low A, Plaz struggled in his very small high A sample of just 41 plate appearances. Encouragingly, Those struggles weren't driven by strikeouts, as he struck out just 6 times compared to 5 walks. The 2026 season will be pivotal in determining whether his success translates against better competition, but Plaz has the profile of a potential fast riser if things click. Finally, my true long shot prospect, Randy Guzman, a 20-year-old first baseman and corner outfielder who isn't currently ranked in the Mets system. After striking out in nearly 1/3 of all plate appearances in the Dominican Summer League from 2023 to 2024, Guzman nearly cut that rate in half during the 2025 season in the Florida Complex League, earning a promotion to Low A. In Low A, Guzman swung at an eye-popping 57% of pitches he saw, yet still maintained those strikeout gains. He maintained this by consistently making hard contact, posting excellent quality of contact metrics and a 396 xwOBA despite a modest 5.7% walk rate. Guzman will almost certainly need to rein in his aggressiveness to succeed at higher levels, but the underlying contact quality profile gives him a real chance if he can make those adjustments. For an unranked prospect, he's absolutely a name worth keeping an eye on. Ultimately, prospect evaluation will never be an exact science. Development isn't linear, players make adjustments, injuries happen, and even the best underlying metrics can't account for everything. Baseball will always have more uncertainty than we'd like. But that uncertainty doesn't mean we're guessing in the dark. What this analysis shows is that not all minor league stats are created equal. Strikeout rate, walk rate, and isolated power tend to carry over from AA. Plate discipline metrics help explain how hitters arrive at their results. And once StatCast data becomes available, quality of contact metrics such as exit velocity, hard hit rate, and barrel rate are the strongest indicators that we have of a prospect's talent. That doesn't mean that every player I mentioned will succeed. Some of them won't. But when you understand which skills translate and which numbers are mostly noise, you start to see prospects differently. Not as rankings on a list, but as players with specific strengths, flaws, and developmental paths. So the next time you're checking a box score from AAA or scrolling through a prospect list, look past the batting average. Pay attention to contact quality. Look at how often the player strikes out or walks. Those are the signals that matter. And maybe, before the rest of the baseball world catches on, you'll already know which names are worth paying attention to. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe. It would really help the channel continue to grow. Thank you, and see you again next video.